Welcome to the Golden Group Strategic Growth Podcast, featuring expert insights, interviews with thought leaders, and business plan triage. Hosted by Kyle Golding, award-winning entrepreneur, CEO, and Chief Strategic Idealist for the Golden Group.
Hi there, I'm Kyle Golding, Chief Strategic Idealist of the Golden Group, and this is Conversations with the Golden Group. I'm here today with Pritch Pritchard, the Chief Strategic Counsel for the Golden Group. He's also APR and PRSA Fellow. And I have a question for you, Pritch. I've heard you talk about crisis communication and that you have a very different approach than a lot of standard PR professionals. Explain.
Absolutely. Plans are a waste of time.
Really? Okay.
Absolutely. I'm going to be contrarian here. You could plan for every eventuality and you're going to get surprised. If you've got 1,000 plans, that 1,001st incident is going to throw you for a loop. The plans are also obsolete as soon as you put them together. Put them on the shelf, never touch them again. Seen it happen over and over again. What's really important in today's environment is to have a protocol for your crisis response.
So a structure.
A structure.
Right.
Whose lane is whose? I mean, what information are you going to provide? Are you going to provide? Knowing who to talk to, who's responsible for X or Y or Z, knowing where to get the information. It's a much simpler team playbook.
That makes sense. So everyone has a better idea of what they're doing and not as an elaborate of a plan, but more of a structure or more of a...
Yeah, structure. Structure is the right way to put it. It's not, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. In a crisis, you're going to figure that out. I mean, certainly I'm going to figure it out. Been through plenty of them. It's everybody knowing what part they play and what information they're supposed to bring to the table so that collaboratively you can figure out how best to approach the crisis.
But the key is, you said, everyone knowing, right? You have
Absolutely.
You have to train with the staff, you have to refer to it, you have to bring it up over and over. It's not something you put on a shelf, right?
It's not an observer sport, it's a participant sport.
Right.
So if you haven't practiced it, annually at the minimum, twice a year is best. So that, and it doesn't have to be elaborative. Tabletops are a great way to do this, to make sure everybody understands their lane, how they're going to coordinate, how they're going to collaborate, and you can run through any kind of scenarios you want. It's a fairly straightforward process. Not enough people do it.
So once you have that in place, what is your best defense in the beginning of a crisis?
Best defense is a strong offense. You've got to be out there. You've got to admit the obvious. And you have to admit that you made a mistake. People forgive mistakes.
Transparency is
transparency
huge.
Is, yeah, well, transparency, but I have a little different definition of transparency. Transparency isn't telling them everything you know. Transparency is telling them what they need to know to make an informed decision. Sometimes transparency is the unethical approach to things. You tell them too much information.
Right. You have to protect certain things in certain situations, right?
Absolutely.
And it's not because it's dishonest or hiding it. It's because it needs to be done in a specific way in order to be effective, right? To communicate right.
And as an example, you're not going to provide business proprietary information in your response. Some people, the true transparencists, if that's a word, the people who preach transparency would say, you're not being transparent. I have a business I have to protect. I can't give you business proprietary information as I try and make sure that you can make sense of this crisis. And it's not really necessary for me to give you that proprietary information to help you make sense. What I need to do is to give you enough information so, one, if there's physical danger involved, you know how to protect yourself. Two, you know what we're doing to make sure that this doesn't happen again and to correct the problem. And three, how we're going to make you whole again.
So the key is focusing on the items, the information, the things that people need in order to achieve those things, and not simply to explain everything you know about everything.
If you've got one thing that you don't want them to see, you put it in like 16 boxes of information and you dump it on them on a Friday afternoon. Malaysian Airlines, 2 years ago, when they lost that aircraft in the Indian Ocean, did just that. They released information that could have been questioned. without context and in amongst a whole bunch of other information, it did not go well for them. People know exactly what it is that you're trying to do when you do stuff like that.
So you have your infrastructure in place, everyone's been trained on it, everyone knows what to do. So when a crisis begins, what's the first thing you do? Trot the CEO out on TV cameras?
Absolutely not. The CEO is probably the last person that you want on camera, unless the situation has such gravitas that you have to have the key person. ExxonMobil, classic case study, the Valdez spill. The CEO should have been on scene, state in New York, not the right way to play that. The Bluebell ice cream, for example.
Right.
Initially, it did not call for the CEO to be involved in that. It was a listeria problem. They had to solve a plant process problem. When it became multiple issues over time, now the CEO's got to talk. But the first thing you do is not spring load to, let's put the CEO in front of the camera and talk about this crisis. Hold them in reserve for the most important moments and when there is that, as I say, gravitas that's required.
But ultimately, the most important aspect of communication crisis management is being pre-prepared.
Absolutely. Preparation is absolutely key. It's essential. If people don't know what they're doing, they're going to run around with their hair on fire screaming.
Right.
And that's not a good thing. When we know, we've seen that, it's not going to end well.
Thank you very much for that very informative look and unexpected look at crisis communication.
Thanks, Kyle. I appreciate sharing with you.
Hi, my name is Kyle Golding, and this is Conversations with the Golding Group. I'm here today with Pritch Pritchard, APR and PRSA Fellow. We're going to talk about strategic communication planning. So, Pritch, why is it important for your communication to work cohesively all together?
Well, it's like having a car where something on it doesn't work exactly right. It's not working to its peak efficiency. And what we're talking about here really, all of the pieces, all of the channels, all of the messages being integrated and working from one common core. Introspection, I think, is part of that. It's the piece that a lot of people don't like to talk about, don't like to pay for. It's called research. And if you don't have research, if you don't understand exactly why you're doing what you're doing from a very strategic level, then things aren't going to work as well as they could.
Research lets you have a well-informed decision-making process, right?
Absolutely. If you don't have the research, you're guessing. And in this business environment, if it was ever possible, you can't guess.
So what are the things you look for? What are the keys? What are the elements that you feel like you need when you put together a complete brand message communication strategy?
Yeah, well, one of the first things is you need to understand exactly what the core competency is for the organization and understand mission and vision and the business objectives, because all of this is for naught if it's not pointed directly at the business objectives.
Right. Yeah. It's all about growth and revenue, right?
Absolutely.
Because if you're not making money, then you're just a hobby.
You're a nonprofit, and even they have to make expenses.
Right. So, Pritch, in your professional opinion, what are the elements that go into making a well-defined strategic communication plan?
Well, I think the first step is that the organization needs to understand itself. And I know that sounds silly, but and maybe counterintuitive, because I understand my business, but sometimes they don't. And in my experience, there are some disconnects as we drill down into that.
And sometimes they're not really good at being honest about what their true strengths and weaknesses are, especially on the weakness side.
And that happens. Over time, your core competency starts here, and then you grow and you evolve, and all of a sudden you find
Market changes.
Right. All of a sudden you find your core competency over here out of balance with your mission. So step one is really sitting down with the client, understanding and helping them understand what it is that they do, and building out from there. Step two then is the research, and nobody likes to pay for research, but if you don't have the research, you're just guessing, and we can't guess.
And that's research for them, for the market, for competition, for government sanctions, for laws, for anything that's going to affect the business, right?
Exactly.
You're putting all that information in front of you before you make the execution decisions further down the road, right?
Exactly, absolutely. Internal factors, external factors, which includes legislation. I think one of the most important pieces of that research is drilling down and truly understanding your target stakeholders. we only have X amount of resources that we can put against something. So we really need to understand and prioritize who it is that we're going to be building a relationship with.
Whether it's economics or energy, effort, right? The
Absolutely.
bandwidth of human capital.
Absolutely.
You only are focused on primary and secondary customers, right? Everyone else, you got to let go and just focus on the people most likely to engage your business, right?
Exactly. And you can have, 2 secondary targets, but the most important is what you said about the primary target stakeholder is the one we want to
And
go
you define those primary and secondary in this process, in the communication strategy.
Absolutely.
Right?
And beyond demographics, with the facts, we like to drill down into the socio-economic, the groups, the psychological kind of mindset, attitudes, beliefs, concerns, values. Those are the things that we're really drilling down into.
And that information gives you a ton of power to actually communicate in a really highly effective way.
Absolutely. Everything is tied to that understanding. Your goals and objectives have to be tied back to that, which of course all have to lead to your business objectives, because otherwise we're just kind of spinning our wheels.
And then the final piece is measurement, right?
Absolutely. You've built that, what you're going to measure. You've defined success in the planning stages. Now you have to go back and see how well you did. Did we actually achieve what we wanted to achieve? It's not that difficult or onerous if you've done a good job up front, but that's why you have to spend so much time up front with the planning.
And there you have strategic communication planning.
Bam. Thank you. Welcome. This is Conversations with the Golding Group. I'm Pritch Pritchard, and we're here today with Kyle Golding, the Chief Strategic Idealist for the Golding Group. Thanks for joining us, Kyle.
Certainly.
So you talk a lot about integrated communications. You talk a lot about business process management. They seem totally different terms. How do you define them? And then how do you bring such seemingly disparate pieces together?
Great question. So first, business process management, BPM. It's the internal structure, everything that goes into making decisions inside a business. It's the information comes in and then it flows back out, and how it's managed along the way, effectively, efficiently, hopefully, is BPM, business process management, which is not the sexiest thing in the world, but it's highly effective because it creates efficiency in your organization. Of course, communication integration, everyone understands communication, but integration is where technology has brought us in 2017 and beyond, is that we can tie all of our communications, internal, external, one-way, two-way conversations together and make them work effectively and efficiently as a whole overall brand voice. So whether it's traditional print, TV, radio, digital channels, social media, customer service, internal training, all of these things, and a newsletter, all kinds of things like that, when they're integrated together, when they're working cohesively to convey your brand message to your target audience and to your stakeholders, it's more effective. So and these are external and internal things, but they cross each other, and this is where a lot of people lose the value of information. And for us, it's all about keeping the value of information and creating new value out of it. So marketing is a two-way conversation. It's putting information out into the world, but receiving information back from your audience. The people that you're targeting are going to tell you what they like and dislike about your offering and the way you're offering it to them. So they're going to pay attention better when the channels are correct and the messages is correct. They're not going to pay attention when you miss the mark. If there's something about it, they like everything but this aspect, whether it's price, method of delivery, customer service, etc., they'll inform you, they'll tell you. Advertising is a one-way conversation. Advertising is just standing on a street corner and shouting out, we have a product, here's where it's at, here's the price of it, go get it. That's one aspect of communication. The second aspect, the marketing aspect, is learning from the effectiveness of that advertising and what it tells you to understand your audience. Where people fail and where we try to make them work really well is to take that information back in internally and inform everyone in the business process chain as to what the audience is demanding. What happens sometimes is everyone gets siloed into what they do inside an organization and they focus on it. Accounting focuses on numbers, engineering or manufacturing focuses on the building of the product. The C-suite is focusing on managing cash flow and keeping everyone happy. HR is focused on employees. all these things are happening. Marketing is supposed to be, as far as internally concerned, taking the message out to the world. If the marketing team is bringing the message, the feedback back in and informing engineering that the size is wrong or the colors are wrong, informing the accounting department the pricing structure is wrong, informing the C-suite that the delivery method is wrong, the customer service is failing, even when they think it's doing well, maybe they've even spent time and money on customer service and it's still failing. If they know that and understand that, they can improve their internal efficiencies and do better. Once you do better with your internal efficiencies, when you're more effective, you lower cost. That's an opportunity for profit.
Absolutely.
2 ways to generate profit, right? Generate more sales, either more people buying it or people buying it at the same cost, but you get to lower that cost. Lower is the internal process. Lowering your cost means you get a higher profitability. So it's either more sales or it costs you less to get those sales. Those are the 2 ways that you can be more profitable. If they work hand in hand, if the marketing is informing the decision making then gets transferred back into marketing, and you explain the value of the effectiveness and efficiency of the internal process to the client. It's better now, it's faster, we heard you about customer service, whatever the weakness was that you can address or pump up your strengths, however your approach isn't both at the same time, ideally, to make you and put you in a better position in the market. Explains value and gives a value proposition to your potential customer and clients. It pushes your competitors further away from your position in the market. And if you lower cost by internal efficiencies, you have opportunity to sell more, and you have a lower cost, which now your profitability potential doubles.
Social media promised from the very beginning to be that very two-way listening feedback.
That's social in social media.
Social. Right? And yet so many companies fail to realize that part of it and use it as a trumpet, if you will. What you're talking about is really delivering on the promise of social media.
Absolutely. Social media is great because you receive that feedback immediately. You can receive feedback from every type of marketing you do, traditional, digital, social media, etc.
Right.
If you pay attention to it. It's the mindset of paying attention to what the audience is telling you and literally not trying to cram it down their throat. It's about creating relationships with your customers and clients and learning from them as much as you try to inform them about what is unique and specific about your product or service, how you solve their pain, how you make their life better. It's a mindset of learning from them and not being so set in here's how we do things,
right.
But it's instead being focused on we do things that the customer and client wants us to do and is more effective. Obviously, we wouldn't do it if it raises the cost and it makes us unprofitable. But if we can lower cost and provide the audience that's demanding it what they're asking for because we listened, then we're going to be even more ingrained in there. We're going to have more brand loyalty. We're going to have more repeat sales. They're going to be brand ambassadors for us, etc. But we have to have the mindset of our audience can tell us how they want to do business.
But it's not a knee-jerk reaction. This
Absolutely.
is very measured, and a lot of it has to do with the preparation you put in on the front end, correct?
Right. With a well-developed strategy and plan going into a market, understanding your position, understanding your strengths, not going places you're weak, avoiding audiences that are not going to react to you well or not at all, having that focus, having that strategy, having that plan in place does allow you to make small incremental moves. When this is being more effective, you go over here, things are being less effective, you take time and money away from them and put them in the places that are effective. But it's not just effective as in clicks on your website or how many followers you have on your
Right.
Instagram. It's about interaction. It's about engagement. It's about conversion. They have to say, I understand what you do. I value what you do. I'm now going to the place where I can make a transaction. You receive my money. I receive your goods and services. And we have a equitable exchange that is good for both parties. If that's where you're working, if that's where you're getting to, it's going to work out the way it should. If you're just simply shouting your message, pushing what you want to push on an audience, and essentially trying to force them to do it your way, at the best, you'll get sales that happen or engagements that happen because they just need to. I need this product to survive in life, right? But you're never going to create something that can become self-sustaining, and you won't receive that feedback from them in order to make it better and better and better, because your competitors are. Your competitors are looking at what you're doing and trying to say, I see what they're doing here, That's their strength and our weakness. Let's work on this so we can address them that way. The market's going to change, technology is going to change, so you always have to be evolving with your audience. Your audience is the key, not how you like to do things internally or what the CEO wants to do.
But it is that measured evolution, and not just getting a bunch of complaints, all of a sudden knee-jerk reacting, changing.
Like anything in business, you can't make it's driving an 18-wheeler.
Right.
You can't make a hairpin turn in an 18-wheeler. You're going to dump the thing over. The bigger an organization, the bigger a business is, the harder it is to steer like that. That's why you always have to be listening and making minor adjustments along the way. Not daily, but more of a weekly, monthly type thing, paying attention to what's happening in the world, and then taking the information you learn from that back in internally to start making big moves way down the road. Forecasting and looking down the road. You can't look at where your front wheel is today. You have to look at where your front wheel is a mile out in front of you.
That exit coming 2 miles down the road, this is where we want to turn.
You have to plan and prepare to make those moves, but you can't knee jerk and you can't make massive moves on short term because you'll topple the whole thing over like an 18-wheeler.
Great. Thanks. Very insightful, Kyle. I appreciate that.
Thank you for listening to the Golden Group Strategic Growth Podcast. Please subscribe so you never miss an episode. Follow the Golden Group on social media. For more information, past episodes, or to contact us, please visit thegoldengroup.com.